Hi there. My name is Alex Kiiffner. I'm a podcast producer and host, and what you're about to watch is the final episode of a short podcast series. Today, we'll round out the world of politics in Ontario and say goodbye for now. I hope this series has given you a better understanding of how democracy works in this province. If you've made it this far, thank you for taking this journey with us, and enjoy today's final episode. Over the course of the last 5 episodes, we've painted with a pretty broad brush the problems Ontario faces and some solutions to them. Maybe you've liked some of those ideas and wondered what the major blocker is to getting them implemented. Well, they're mostly people-first ideas, and right now in Ontario, it doesn't always feel like the people hold the power.
It also includes boosting the maximum donations to election campaigns by nearly 50%. That's now going to be $5,000
In episode 1, we
per
established that democracy might not be entirely fair right now. Doug Ford was elected by a minority of voters and yet holds a majority in the legislature.
My friends, this victory belongs to you.
Beyond that campaign, there was another element that we only touched on a little that we're going to get to today. In episode 2, we learned that once MPPs do get into Queen's Park, they have only a little power because of the changes made early on. And by episode 3, we were discussing how bills get pushed through and how there may be another element deciding how government prioritizes what they want to do. Episode 4, we talked about the housing crisis, how there are good solutions out there, but if it's commodified, then the big players don't have a strong incentive to make things better for the average person. And finally, we rounded out episode 5 with farming, and there was another force lingering in the background. We've danced around it the whole time through this series, but now we're addressing it head on. That's corporate money and how it shapes the economy.
It says 100 of Canada's highest paid CEOs made an average of $16.2 million in 2024.
Inflation has been great for corporate profits.
Today, Metro said its profits surged 26%.
Food prices are soaring, and Loblaw says customers are shopping more often at discount grocers. That helped boost its earnings.
It drives everything. And today, we want to talk about 2 critical questions. What does an economy based on people actually look like? And 2, how do you actually get there? My name is Alex Kiiffner. I'm here at Queen's Park with Guelph MPP and leader of the Ontario Green Party, Mike Schreiner, to help talk this through in the final episode of this series. I feel like we just hit our stride. How are you, Mike?
I'm going to miss this, Alex. I've been enjoying our conversations.
I know. And this is our last one, and I think we kind of saved the best for last year. This is the big one, tying everything together. And, we get to kind of explore all those ideas that we've gone over and how they fit into a different look, I guess, of how the economy could be and how, putting people first might change things. But corporate money has been a big theme of it. I mean, I think you touched on it in probably all of the episodes so far in the different ways it affects things. But maybe can you start off with kind of a high-level overview? How does it drive the economy, and how does it actually go from being up here, big rich corporations, they're high up, they're driving things, they're doing this and that, to down here, people are suffering? What's going on in the middle?
Yeah, well, one of the things we're experiencing right now is a hollowing out of the middle class. Inequality has never been greater than it is in Canada right now. And a lot of that is driven by financial decisions that are pushing wealth to the top 1% at the expense of the other 99%. And I think that's dangerous for society. Whenever you've seen societies throughout history where you have major wealth inequality, those societies oftentimes collapse because the majority of people are not benefiting from the way the society is governed, the way the economy works, etc. And so I'm deeply concerned about this, and I think we need to look at how we rebalance things to make it fair for average, everyday working people. And part of that, for somebody who works in the political arena, is how do we get big money out of politics?
Yeah, and I mean, maybe you can speak on that a little bit. Big money in politics. Where do we see that affecting things?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, first of all, it's way better in Canada than it is in the U.S. I mean, in the U.S., it's just horrific to see the way in which corporations and millionaires and billionaires can make, $1 million contributions to political parties and drive the agenda of both the Republicans and the Democratic Party. Here in Canada, thankfully, we've banned corporate and union donations at the federal level and at the provincial level. It used to be really bad in Ontario. And one of the things I'm really proud of is while I was leader of the Ontario Green Party, but before I was elected MPP, we ran a campaign to get big money out of politics. And I'll give Premier Kathleen Wynne credit at the time, back in 2016. The government did make some significant changes to the way political donations are handled in Ontario. And they were facing scandal because cabinet ministers were being forced to, collect donations in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, holding events where, corporations and individuals were being asked to, pay $1,000 to get access to a cabinet minister or the premier. And all of that changed in 2016 when corporate and union donations were banned and donation limits for individuals were reduced to $1,200. Which really meant $3,600 because you could give $1,200 to the party, $1,200 to a constituency association, and $1,200 to a campaign, but still significantly reduced. But unfortunately, since Doug Ford's been elected, we've been moving in the opposite direction. So first of all, Ford passed legislation shortly after being elected that raised donation limits up and also allowed for pay-to-play fundraising events. And so since then, the Premier holds all these events all the time where it costs you $1,000 to be able to access the event, to be able to have access to the Premier. And not everyone has $1,000 to have access to the Premier. So I think that's wrong. And so we've seen donation limits in Ontario now go from $1,200 in 2018 to now $5,000 in 2025. And that's like a 320% increase.
Yeah.
And so we're starting to see pay-to-play, big money influence have a disproportionate influence in political decisions in Ontario. And I think, we saw that manifest itself in the $8.3 billion Greenbelt scandal.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the Greenbelt, I'm sure we'll come back in a minute. I just wanted to quickly touch on those dinners because if people aren't familiar, I guess it's essentially you pay it's usually $1,000 as you say. You go to one of these clubs in downtown Toronto, these supper clubs, and then is it like a networking event? Is it schmoozing? What's the deal there?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both, and then they ask you to give more money once you show up.
Oh, okay.
And so every party runs fundraisers.
Sure.
The Green Party does too. We don't charge you to show up at one, but we certainly will ask you for money at events because every party needs to be able to fund itself. But I just think it's wrong to, especially when you're in government and people want to have access to a minister or the premier or, a committee chair, for example, to be able to have to pay $1,000 just to even get through the door, that's wrong. I think it corrupts our politics. I think it gives a disproportionate amount of influence in our democracy to the wealthy and well-connected. And I think that then leads to public policy decisions that hurt average people. I think we can see that most pronounced in the housing, with the housing crisis. Almost the Premier's entire agenda when it comes to housing is to benefit wealthy, well-connected land speculators over building homes that everyday people can afford. And I think some of that is driven by the fact that big money in politics has way too much influence in Ontario.
So what do you do about it?
Well, you lower donation limits and you, in the practice, of pay-to-play events. So, maybe a party needs to cover their basic costs for a fundraiser. So if that's like $50 or something,
right.
Maybe. I still think you should just not allow these pay-to-play events. But like $1,000, that's outrageous. So that's one, let's end pay-to-play events and let's lower donation limits. Even when Kathleen Wynne made them $1,200, I said it should be less than $1,000, just to create more fairness and equity. But at the very least, let's get back to $1,200. So go from $1,200 to $5,000. That's a huge increase, and it definitely gives people who are wealthy a bigger voice in Ontario politics, and I think that's wrong.
Right, and as you say, that would be about $15,000 if you do the whole party.
Yeah. Well,
thing.
they switched up a little bit, so it's like $5,000 to the party, about $3,300 to a riding association, and $3,300 to a campaign. So I guess that would be I know somewhere 12.
Yeah, around 12. Yeah, the math is kind of funny on those numbers, but yeah.
But it's still a lot of money.
It is still a lot of money.
Like,
no, absolutely.
a handful of people can spend that kind of money to influence Ontario politics. The average person, maybe they're able to give $100. I think our average donation is around $100, and that's the way it should be.
Yeah. So, I think for a lot of people when they look at these big money events, it feels really tough because there is so much money in it, and that buys a lot of influence.
100%.
How do you go about fighting that as a small party or as an individual or as an activist or whoever it might be?
Well, I think we need to run another get big money out of politics campaign. I remember when I was running I was part of running a nonprofit organization. Then we were trying to influence policy at Queen's Park, and we would always have these agonizing conversations of like, well, do we spend $1,000 to go to this event? Is that an ethical use of money as a nonprofit? But if we don't do it, then, how do we get how do we get in front of a minister and be able to, get our agenda on the table? And so I think those are just dilemmas that people in this province should not be put through. I think everyone should have access to their politicians. Nobody should be forced to spend $1,000 to be able to go to an event with the premier. And so I think we need to have another movement to put pressure on government to get big money out of politics, and hopefully we're as successful as we were in 2016.
Can you tell me a bit about the 2016 initiative? What worked there, and how did you go about it?
Well, first of all, I got to give a shout out to journalists, and particularly the Toronto Star, Martin Ridgecone, who did a real hard campaign about it. The Green Party, we did a big campaign getting big money out of politics. People put pressure on the premier, and I think Kathleen Wynne, to her credit, she listened and she acted in a way that I think angered a number of people in her own party because the Liberal Party of the day was benefiting from the big donations they were receiving. And so it took a lot of courage, I think, for her to do that. Unfortunately, Doug Ford is undoing all of that. But, Doug Ford has governed in a way that puts the wealthy and well-connected ahead of average everyday people. And I think we see that in the way he's, changed the rules to give people with big money and deep pockets a bigger say in our politics.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to shift over to the broader economy outside of just the money in politics. The wording that I've heard is sort of a people-first economy. And can you just give me a broad picture of how that would look?
Well, first of all, I think we need to have policies in place that put people before profits. And I say that as a longtime small business owner. So I'm not opposed to profits. Like, businesses need to make a profit. And when I was running my business, I wouldn't have been able to meet payroll and pay my commercial rent if I wasn't put food on my own table if I wasn't making a profit. So I'm all for profits. I believe in markets. But the extreme levels of profit we're seeing today that's leading to extreme levels of inequality, I think is a huge threat to our society. And I say to people all the time that we oftentimes look back to the 1950s and 60s and say, oh man, Ontario's economy was doing so well back then and it was growing and you were seeing reducing levels of inequality and, why can't we get back to that? And, at that time, corporate corporate taxes were around 46, 47%. Now they're around 23%. So, government was generating enough revenue to make investments in public infrastructure that helped drive growth, helped drive our economy, and then was reducing inequality at the same time. The highest marginal tax bracket for the wealthiest in Canada at that time was in the 80%. Now it's like 48%. So I'm not suggesting we go back to 88%. I'm not suggesting we go back to 47%, but I do think changing our tax structure in a way to make it more progressive, to ensure that government has enough money to be able to invest in the things that make life good for people: education, healthcare, social services, infrastructure, transit, roads, bridges, an electricity system that is clean and affordable for people. and governments since the 1980s have really restricted their ability to do that and have had this privatization agenda that has really driven inequality and primarily benefited the wealthy and well-connected in our society.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess if you cut your revenues in half, it's always going to be a little tougher to do that. What hagpened to that structure? Is it a money and politics thing? Why did the taxes get so low? Like, where did those go?
Yeah, well, I think in the 1970s with stagflation, where we had inflation and a slowing economy, primarily driven by the first OPEC oil crisis. People were looking for a solution to that, and neoliberal economists came in and said, well, hey, you know what, the problem is taxes are too high, governments have too much power and influence, and so we need to reduce regulations, we need to reduce taxes, we need to privatize parts of the public service, and some of that may have been needed, but we've gone way too far in the other direction. And now we're in a situation where we have even slower economic growth, and we have extreme inequality, which is leading to, you know, a record number of people going to food banks, a record number of people experiencing homelessness, a whole generation of young people not able to even think about owning a home. I mean, a lot of the things we've talked about during this podcast, and we have to fix that. If we don't fix that, I'm deeply concerned you're going to see, you know, an undermining of our democracy and a disintegration of our society. I think you're already seeing it in the U.S., where the extremes are much greater than they are here in Canada. So thankfully, we live in Canada, we live in Ontario, but I don't think we want to go down that path. We don't want to go down that road. And so I think we can have an economy that, you know, takes advantage of the best aspects of the market, in business capital investment and all of those things, but has guardrails in place that protect people and ensure that we value people and not just excessive corporate profits.
Do you think there's ever a world where we have to change our views on government and the way we look at these things? Because I feel like a lot of people still have that perception of government has too much power and they have to do too much this and that. Like, is this a problem of our relationship with government, I guess?
Well, I think it's something we hear every day. I mean, almost all the legacy media are corporate-owned, corporate-controlled, owned by wealthy individuals. So they drive a message and a narrative and an agenda that reinforces the notion that government's an intrusion in our lives, government has too much power, government's taking too much money from you. I mean, Doug Ford says that all the time. But all government is just a way for us all to come together as Canadians or Ontarians and be able to afford to do things at a lower cost, because we can do it more efficiently collectively than individually, for the benefit of everyone in society. And when it's done through a democratic process, and we've talked about how our democracy does need to be improved, but we still do have a democracy, even though it's flawed, then we can deploy resources in a way that benefits the most people and lays the foundation for future success. I mean, we're still living off of the investments the public sector made in the 1950s, 1960s, and early 1970s. When we look at our education system, our colleges and universities, a lot of the infrastructure, our transit systems, our roads, our bridges, our ports, all of that kind of stuff, we've underinvested in all of that over the last 30 years. And we're going to need to reinvest in that if we're going to drive economic growth, prosperity, and ensure that prosperity is shared in a way that we have a healthy society. That's not happening right now.
Yeah. Well, I think the thing that strikes me too is that when we take money or power away from government, we're basically putting it in the hands of corporations.
Well, we're taking the power away from we the people.
Yeah.
Because we are the government.
We're the government.
We're the ones who decide what the government is and who it is. So when we starve the public sector, we're actually starving ourselves. We're starving investment in healthcare. We're starving investment in education. We're starving investment in housing. We're starving investment in affordable, reliable transit. All these public goods that make life wonderful. we're starving. And other societies, you go to Europe, you go to Asia, they're still investing in public goods and the public sector and public infrastructure. And I can't tell how many Canadians travel to those places and say, like, why can't we have that here? Why can't we have that here in Ontario? And I'm like, yeah, we could. We're actually in many cases wealthier than those countries. But so a disproportionate amount of our wealth is going to a handful of wealthy, well-connected folks. And if we invested a little bit more in high quality public goods, services, and infrastructure, that would benefit all of us, including the wealthy.
Yeah, that's the funny thing about it. But on your point about the, Canadians look at these European countries, there's like, you can find on YouTube, there's all these great channels. One I think it's called Not Just Bikes, and it's about, all the transit systems in Europe relative, and this guy uses Toronto as an exact example about the difference between streetcars here and streetcars there. And and this is what happens, I guess, when you disinvest in government.
Yeah.
So I guess that's kind of a little bit of a look at the difference between when you put corporations at your apex of your government versus when you look at government as its own driver.
Yeah. Can I connect that back to money and politics really quick?
Yeah, please.
Because when those wealthy folks are able to donate $10,000, $15,000, pay $1,000 to go to these events, they're the ones who have the ear of government. They're the ones who are in front of ministers and the premier, and it's their worldview, their priorities that are being discussed, and not the need for building deeply affordable homes, for example, for folks who can't afford a home. And so this is where money in politics really drives the agenda, and one of the reasons I think it's critically important that we reduce donation limits and get rid of these pay-to-play fundraising events.
Yeah, when I even wrote in the intro, I don't think a lot of people disagree with these ideas. Like I think everyone I've talked to goes, yeah, these are really good ideas. Why don't we implement them? Mm-hmm. And that's exactly why, because who are you talking to that actually has that power? You probably can't get access to them. So a few places we can go from there. I guess we should. I want to address sort of the arguments I've seen against this idea of the people first economy. I guess at its most basic level, what people will say is that you need these corporations that have money. They have to be the Kickstarter. They have to jumpstart the economy because they've got the capital to do it. And that if you take the power away from them, you'll essentially stagnate the economy, and you don't want them to be upset because they need to drive our investment. Thoughts on that?
Well, we absolutely need large corporations to drive capital investment. I'm not saying we shouldn't have large corporations. I mean, I carry around this nice little smartphone. I use it every day. I really enjoy it. I don't want Apple to go bankrupt and not supply me with this great little smartphone I have. I drive this amazing electric vehicle. I don't want Chevrolet to go out of business or GM to go out of business and I don't have my electric vehicle, or I don't want them to not have the capital to make the investment. All I'm calling for is just a bit of fairness, and to have large corporations and wealthy individuals pay a little bit more so we can have the resources we need to invest in public goods, public services, public infrastructure in a way that's fiscally responsible and sustainable, so we don't have to go in debt to do it and then put it on the backs of our children and grandchildren and pay interest on it to large corporations and banks and bondholders. And so I would say that we're not saying let's get rid of corporations, let's get rid of capital investment. I'm not saying that. I mean, there are some people out there who may say that, but not me. But we just need some guardrails. We need a fair, more progressive tax system. We need to value the important role that public services play. And I would also say we need to value the role small businesses play in our society as well. I mean, one of the things that really pains me right now is we have no regulations around commercial rent or commercial tenancy. We do for residential,
None.
Nothing for commercial. And so right now, I can't tell you how many small businesses are coming to me who are closing their businesses because rents are being jacked up by corporate landlords. And you have large corporations, and I don't want to single any out, but you can probably imagine which ones, that are moving into these spaces, displacing local entrepreneurs and local businesses. And so even just having some regulations around like a commercial tenancy act to help protect small businesses, or a tax system that reduces the tax burden on the small businesses and asks larger businesses to cover the gap. So we can have a more diversified, bright, vibrant economy, so we can create pathways for success for entrepreneurs. And so the fairness isn't just always for employees of businesses. It's also for people who want to be entrepreneurs or start small businesses. And it's oftentimes, if you think of the neighborhoods that people live in, part of the reason they want to live in those neighborhoods, part of the reason they love those neighborhoods, is because all the great small businesses are there. But if we don't have policies in place that are going to enable those small businesses to be there, then you lose that joy that you get out of living in a vibrant, livable neighborhood.
Yeah, I live at Dundas and Dufferin here in Toronto, it's exactly that. I just moved in there, and it's all these local shops that have been there for decades. But I guess there's no landlord-tenant board, as it were, for small businesses. You're totally at the whim of your landlord.
100%.
They can do whatever
at your lease.
At your lease or whatever it is.
Signed.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things that some small businesses have come to me to talk to me about is, they're not necessarily saying we need rent control or things like that, but they're saying like having a commercial tenancy act to have some guardrails and protections in place for small businesses to make sure that our main streets and our neighborhoods still have local entrepreneurs and locally owned businesses, and that they're not pushed out of and priced out of the marketplace. So that's the hawk, by the way.
I was wondering.
The Queen's Park hawk has just landed in its nest in my office here. So the distraction, everyone, is the hawk, and you can watch the hawk on the live stream on my YouTube page.
I was wondering if something hit the window. I don't know if it picked up on Mike, but it gave me a little startle there. Yeah. But yeah, he's up there. They got a big nest right up there.
Yeah, I think it's probably she. But
anyway.
She's
got a big nest? Okay.
Yeah, she's got a big nest up there, and she's probably going to start getting ready to see about. Oh, there, she just flew away. Hopefully we'll see some eggs in that nest.
Yeah. Check out the live stream, Mike Schreiner on YouTube. Okay, let's. Unfortunately, I think start to wrap it up. I don't want to end it just yet because that means the series is over. I want to also just give you a second to give any calls to action or any final thoughts you might have just before we wrap things up for the last episode here.
Yeah, you know what? I'm just going to say people power works. And so, not everyone has a lot of money. And certainly the Green Party is not a party with a lot of money compared to the other parties. But the vast numbers of just average, everyday people in Ontario far outnumber the wealthy and well-connected. And you can counterbalance big money with people power. And we saw that with the Greenbelt scandal, where the premier was going to open the Greenbelt for development, so like 5 people could cash in $8.3 billion. And people pushed back against that, and they said, we don't want you to pave over the places we love and we spend time with our family. We don't want you to pave over all this fantastic prime farmland that feeds our communities and drives our economy. And people pushed back against the premier, and the people defeated the big money interests. And we can replicate that on other issues too, like getting proper funding for healthcare, or ensuring that we reverse cuts to OSAP so students don't have huge debt burdens when they graduate from college or university. We can do that, but it's going to take people being engaged in politics. It's going to take people speaking out. It's going to take people putting pressure on politicians of all political stripes, but especially the Conservatives who have a false majority government right now. And so I want to leave people with hope. That I think the people of Ontario care deeply about each other, and they want their neighbors and their fellow citizens to do well and to be cared for and to thrive. And right now, I don't think we have a government that reflects that, but we can change that.
Well, certainly leave me with hope. And I've learned a lot about this, and hopefully you at home have as well. I think that's a great way to close. Hope, get involved. That's the biggest thing. Thank you so much for taking this journey with us. And of course, thank you, Mike, for this. This has been awesome. Really, it's been great. If you enjoyed it, please make sure to let us know. And hey, maybe there'll be room for another run of some episodes one day, eh, Mike?
Alex, would love to do it with you again. It's been fun.
Okay, well, thank you, and take care.